So, what did burn after you read this actually mean? What was it truly about? And for what reasons was Brian Laundrie doing these things that he was doing with messages like burn after you read this? Well, to be honest, folks, your guess is as good as mine. I don't know. But in this video, we are going to explore much, much, much more, much deeper. And we're going to discover an answer as to why. I think it would be good for everyone to know why. Because the words, burn after you read this, definitely implies something very significant. And so that will be covered in this video with much more and more content as we kind of peel back the onion to explore more of what that means. Thank you again, right here on JTC channel. Brian Laundrie's official notes and the notebook stated on the cover, burn after you read this letter. Brian Laundrie was sent the letter by his mother, Roberta, and it states, burn after you read this. Gabby Petito's family attorney has claimed that Roberta Laundrie sent a letter to her fugitive son, marked burn after you read this, in the weeks before his alleged demise. The fresh allegations come following a release of the Brian Laundrie Journal, recovered from the Chachachki Creek Environmental Park on October 20th, 2021. Gabby's attorney claims that Roberta Laundrie was in communication with Brian before his alleged demise. Extracts from Brian Laundrie's journal found with his remains were released again on Friday. The published photographs are taken of Laundrie's journal. The photos inside the notebook and on the outside appear to reveal the manner in which Laundrie would have killed and murdered Gabby Petito. The extracts that are included in the chilling final moments that saw the vlogger gasping in pain as Laundrie detailed what he believed to be merciful show a lot more than anyone knew. Pat Riley, the attorney who represents the Gabby Petito family, Joe and Nicole, swiftly issued a statement that condemns the release of the documents. He simultaneously slammed Brian Laundrie family attorney, Stephen Bertolino, for cherry-picking parts of the journal and the journal entries inside the book to be released. He told WFLA again, I find it ironic that Mr. Bertolino says he was in full transparency going to release this notebook. Well, someone should ask him why he does not release the entire notebook and all of the covers where they allege this is written across the top. They should ask him why he doesn't release the entire Roberta Laundrie letter as well. In his statement, Riley claims there is a copy of the letter that features some extreme details of the Gabby Petito murder and homicide. He alleges that a copy of the apparent letter is in possession of Bertolino and is being withheld from the public. There are some pretty extreme things she said in there that without having the letter here to quote it exact, I don't want to speak to that, but I will simply tell you there are very extreme things that are contained in this letter, he again claimed. Riley has claimed this letter is undated and believes the note was written after Gabby was killed and before Brian took his life. He alleges that the apparent letter was found in the Laundrie family's home, but was taken out of the van that Brian and Gabby had been traveling the country in. He said, I will tell you that on the envelope it contains the letter and the words, burn after you read this, are written in bold writing, directly on the front. The most I want to say is that there was an offer to assist Brian Laundrie with other issues. Riley also told News Nation's Brian Enton that the notebook is not the only confession inside. He told me today there is a second confession, apparently on a digital device, and a third confession done in a written format. Riley says he has not seen these confessions, but the FBI told him they are somewhat different in all aspects from the confession that's inside the notebook. The latest claims: Gabby Petito's parents are now in the courtroom. The latest claims come after Gabby Petito's parents had faced off with Stephen Bertolino in Sarasota County, Florida. The Petito family sued Chris and Roberta Laundrie for allegedly withholding information about their daughter. The Laundrie's family lawyer filed a motion to dismiss. They claimed the Laundries knew that their son killed Gabby Petito and knew where her body was located, but remained silent and prepared to allow Brian to flee the country. Both of Gabby Petito's parents were in the courtroom, while the Laundrie family and their lawyer, Stephen Bertolino, were not present. The lawyers squared off and presented their arguments about whether the lawsuit should be dismissed or proceed as planned. Matthew Lusa said in court that they had a right to remain silent. He was challenged by Judge Hunter Carroll, who was presiding over the case, if Bertolino's lone comment about hoping Gabby and her family are reunited was made on behalf of Brian Laundrie's family. Court ruling. Gabby Petito's lawyer, Patrick Riley, said that their silence and Bertolino's lone comment, while allegedly knowing Gabby Petito was dead, provided a false hope and invoked much more distress upon all involved. Carroll will weigh the two sides and is expected to make a final ruling. After the hearing, Riley again addressed the media with a rhetorical question. What crime did Brian Laundrie or the Laundrie family commit? While Gabby Petito was missing, he said they weren't under investigation or considered suspects. Now, the reality is, based upon what I've really been able to diagnose so far from the burn after you read this phenomenon, the reality here is the burn after you read this is referring to something that deals directly with the van. And that's what's interesting, because they kind of hint towards this a couple of times, some of the legal notes that have been written about the case, that there were questions remaining about the actual van, the white van itself that was seen in different areas, not necessarily only with Gabby Petito, but was seen in different areas with various people over the years. And the actual van, this white van that they apparently had, because they bought it from somebody in some kind of specific time and place, some kind of date that hasn't been specified yet. There was something that was dealing directly with the letter inside the actual van itself. And there's evidence. One could say that there's evidence that's basically being concealed in a way that deals directly with the van that Gabby Petito apparently ended up driving on the whole excursion and so on. And they claim that the van actually belongs to the Petitos, but there's a lot of evidence that suggests much, much different. It suggests that the van actually belongs to Nicole Schmidt's husband. And that's a story for certainly another video, that it needs to be, really qualified and covered in detail, how that alters certain parts of the conversation concerning the Brian Laundrie case. But in my best estimation, my theory that I've started to come up with in regards to the phrase that they use, if burn after you read this. I believe that Roberta Laundrie was potentially instructing her son, Brian Laundrie, in that particular case, to get rid of evidence that was inside of the van, or that was in some sense connected directly with the van. And make no mistake, that could be a number of things, that's true. But I believe that it had something to do with more of the cover-up that's actually concerning the white van. Again, because if we remember, that letter actually came into view. They didn't know about the part where it was discussing burn after you read this. But the first original, paperwork and so on for that letter actually came into view around the time that they started either getting rid of the van, or the van somehow ended up in someone else's possession. And so what I feel is that, based upon some of the forensic evidence I've already looked at, and the other investigators have started to really dissect, that it does deal directly with the van, and certain evidence that was not ever released publicly that concerns the van. And that is a very interesting point that goes kind of to the heart of this case. It's very, very important too. It says, Luca, who represents the Laundrie family, did not publicly address the media after the hearing ended. In June 2021, Gabby Petito and her fiance, Brian Laundrie, set off on a cross-country trip across the U.S. So it goes over the timeline, but it says now on August 25th, Gabby Petito FaceTimes Nicole Schmidt directly for the final time. In the police report, Nicole Schmidt says her conversations reveal more tension between Nicole and Brian Laundrie. Gabby Petito posts her last and final Instagram post, and on August 27th, Gabby Petito is seen for what is believed for the last time. 4 hours later, travel bloggers drive through the Grand Teton National Park, and they see that van for the first part of the trip. On September 1st, Brian returns home to Florida. September 11th, the Gabby Petito parents prepare for later filing of a suit, and they report her missing to Suffolk County. Brian's family issues a statement saying he has retained an attorney and is not cooperating. September 15th, Florida's Northport Police announced Brian as a person of interest. On September 19th, authorities in Wyoming now state they found a body in the Grand Teton National Park, which they do not know the identity of, and some believe it to be Gabby Petito. September 20th, police execute a search warrant on Brian Laundrie's home, seizing the silver Mustang and a hard drive with evidence. Then September 23rd, officials announce a federal arrest warrant for Brian Laundrie. On October 12th, the Gabby Petito autopsy is made public. Teton County Coroner Brent Blue confirms Gabby Petito was killed in strangulation, homicide. October 20th, Brian Laundrie's personal items are found at the Mayakachi Creek Environmental Park, allegedly. And then Gabby Petito's parents report them missing and report them to the Suffolk County. So there's a lot to that whole idea of burn after you read this. But in my estimation, based upon some of the surveillance footage I finally got a hold of, and based upon a lot of the forensics that I looked into, the reason that it says burn after you read this is because Roberta Laundrie, it's showing how Roberta Laundrie, in that case, desires to get rid of a number of key pieces of evidence. Now, in a way, that is a supposition, but based upon the evidence and so forth that I've really dissected, I'm going to say that it was, in fact, done to get rid of evidence. And my working theory right now is a number of the pieces of evidence that deal with the burn after you read this issue are directly concerning the white van. And that would explain again why the white van allegedly disappears around the time that they first start to uncover this letter. So another part of my working theory with the van itself is I believe that there was something inside the van. Perhaps a weapon or perhaps a type of product that's used always when dealing with, lotion for skin or similar things, that is something that they just missed. And Roberta Laundrie, she's crafty enough, not too bright, but crafty enough to desire to get rid of, all of those things, whether it was a product or maybe a cleaning product of some kind, that were inside the van before anybody else, starts talking about the van or making the van a topic of conversation. And so I'm sticking by that point that I do believe burn after you read this is absolutely speaking directly about the van, but not the van in itself. I believe that it's pointing, though, to the van as far as evidence that concerns that and concerns the other crimes that are possibly tied to it. So there was something that was inside that white van. And it's a challenge to be able to tell what it is because we don't have really the facts of who took possession of that van. But somebody took things, out of that van. In my estimation, around this same time that the letter was written. And that's what I'd like to get, really, really clear on why they wanted to go into that van so much, and start getting real answers on that because, not enough people have been connecting the fact that the van disappeared around the time that this letter showed up. So thank you. Thank you once again for continuing to get the word out. Make sure to spread this far and wide on JTC channel. Much more to discover. Thank you. Laundrie's notes called Rubbish as two more different confessions are surfacing. The confession letter of Brian Laundrie, in which he detailed the murder for Gabby Petito, has been deemed rubbish on a podcast. This comes as another lawyer who represents the 22-year-old woman's family claims that the context of two more confessions, apparently recorded on a digital device, are to be disclosed. News Nation's senior national correspondent Brian Enton, who has been following the Gabby Petito case since the start, spoke with Laura Richards again on Crime Analyst and Real Crime Profile podcast amidst the flurry of Gabby Petito accusations and the legal battle against the Laundries in court. Addressing the letter in specific, Enton stated, "I think most people immediately thought this is a bunch of rubbish," before noting that he was sure that it would come out very soon. This thing is going to surface. Gabby Petito's mother, Nicole Schmidt, sends love in a touching message amid a legal battle. The truth is to be revealed now. Enton questioned the condition of the journal as she pointed out we had heard that the notebook was in the water, that parts of it were understandable. It was interesting. You could read the whole thing for the most part. It seemed like it was in good condition or good shape. During the podcast, the news spokesperson also mentioned his visit to Grand Teton, close to where Gabby Petito's remains are discovered on September 19th. He stated it is a very popular area with the tourist companies. It's remote, but there is definitely people who drive here. The van was on the side of the dirt road. He went on to explain it is probably a 10-minute walk from the actual van to where her body is later discovered. Granted, you have to walk through a shallow creek, but it is not that far, as you could get back to the van within a total of 10 minutes if you're walking at a regular speed. The other thing, the cell phone service is really good. I wasn't expecting it, but I had almost full service and 4 bars. Enton insisted the internet is good, so I immediately don't buy the story for that reason, just because in my mind I was going back mentally to being right there in the thick of it. He probably could have seen the van from where he was, and the whole idea of a phone or just yelling out for some reason. Again, there were many campsites around there, so it didn't come up. He could just, start screaming, for example. It didn't add up to what would happen here. And when Richard said that the letter is probably just one of 3 confessions by Brian Laundrie, Enton stated that that was a surprise to me. He also claims that Petito's lawyer, Pat Riley, said to him that one is on a digital device. So it doesn't really make too much sense that could be the case. But then he also talked about this other letter from Roberta Laundrie that said something on the top of it that stated, "Burn after you read this," on the outside. Riley did not want to get into detail about what the letter said in specific. He basically said it is going to be very interesting when it is finally revealed. The podcast reportedly featured an interview between Brian Enton and Riley, and Patrick Riley in this case, in which the victim's family attorney is heard stating, "There is at least one possible or 2 other confessions inside. We do not have them right now. We just have the one for the letter. But my understanding is one on the digital device, and there may be another one also on the outside. From what we were told, they are each different confessions." So in other words, there is something that's going on with this letter that proves, that not all of the evidence was ever turned in. There's something that proves in the letter that Roberta Laundrie lied, from the very beginning. And I think that could be, that's important. That could be a very key point in uncovering why Brian Laundrie was where he was to start with, at the onset. It could also lead to discovery of what the letter in fact is, because they claim that this letter is the evidence, that's needed to see the other side of the case. And, I'd just personally like to indicate again, I think it's time that we see the actual letter itself. Burn after you read this, for example, implies quite a few different things. But to know exactly why they would say that the letter needs to be burned, I think it's very important that we, discover exactly what it says inside the letter. There is a lot of indications that show that the letter most likely contains further evidence. And by further evidence, that means evidence that actually implicates Brian Laundrie in other things. And I think it's very important to to release all the information on that letter. In the interest of public discourse, we need to hear, exactly what is inside that letter. But more and more, I'm saying it does deal directly with the van. I don't think there's any question about that. And there's a lot that needs to be answered about what happened here. We need to see all three letters and compare them. That's true. We need to see what the letters themselves actually say. And from there, I think we'll be able to finally, start to really put this together. But yeah, we do need to compare the description, and we need to compare the writing as well that's in those letters. So thank you again. Continue to spread the word and get this out there far and wide. There's more to come right here. JTC. Thank you. Laundrie were on a cross-country road trip when the letter was first revealed. So, and this is some of the handwriting that they're claiming is on each of these letters, but I'm just I'm withholding judgment. I'd like to see what all the letters actually say. What the letters look like. I'm waiting until really the main crux of the evidence starts getting revealed. Enton appeared on the Crime Analyst podcast with Laura Richards to discuss the Brian Laundrie letter. The podcast mostly focused on the contents of the letter, which Richard slammed as being nonsense. Brian Enton revealed his surprise at learning that there could be two other additional confessions, including the digital confession. I think most people immediately thought, this is rubbish, when the contents of the letter were released. Enton says he always thought that Brian Laundrie's letter would become available and that it was just a matter of time. We had heard that the notebook was in the water, that parts of it were understandable and parts of it were illegible. They couldn't read it. It was interesting. You could read the whole thing for the most part. It was in good condition. Geography of the Grand Tetons. Enton also spoke of his visit to the Grand Tetons Park, right where Gabby Petito's body was first found. It's a very popular destination for tourists. The van was on the side of the dirt road right by the creek bed and creek. On the other side is where Gabby Petito's body is finally found. It's actually a 10-minute walk from the van to where her body was first found. But granted, you have to walk through a shallow creek bed to actually get there. But it wasn't really that far if you add up, the distance. Use your calculator or use your, time watch. And the other thing, the cell phone service was, very good. I was not expecting any of this, but it did have full cell phone service. The internet was very good. So I immediately would not buy the story just for that reason, because in my mind I was going back mentally to being right there. The story Brian Enton referred to is the one from the letter, in which Brian Laundrie details injuries Gabby Petito sustained and how she would not let Laundrie cross the creek because she thought, like me, the fire would go out in her sleep and she would freeze. It just didn't add up. Other letters that exist in the notebook. Richards mentioned during the podcast that Brian Laundrie's letter was one of 3 possible confessions. One is on a digital device. One is in something other than the notebook. And the other is the one that's inside the notebook itself. One of them has "Burn after you read this" on the official cover. He basically said it is going to be very interesting when this is all made public now. There's at least 2 other confessions in writing. My understanding is one of the digital devices contains yet another confession. So what's interesting about this is, um, you know, it's referring to burn after you read this. And again, the Grand Teton Park keeps being referenced. But see, the interesting issue with the Grand Teton Park is we now know there were other things happening in that park. We now know about, the bullets that were shot back and forth. We know that there was more people in that park, most certainly, than just some random person like Brian Laundrie. So there was definitely something more complex going on in the Wyoming park. And we've started to unearth more of a picture of what actually happened there. But the point is, it obviously dealt with the letter. When I think about the words burn after you read this, it makes me think that Brian was hiding something that happened in the Wyoming National Park. That's what it makes me think of. And that'd be a great way to be able to get rid of evidence that would later implicate what he was really doing, or perhaps what was going on in the Wyoming National Park. Because we know, of course, we finally confirmed there were additional bullet holes. We've confirmed that the hunters were there. We know there was other things happening in the Grand Teton Park. And as a result, they probably did have their rifles out. It's been pretty much confirmed by forensics finally at this point that there were some people out there who had rifles or long rifles of some kind. And so burn after you read this implies that Brian Laundrie was going to get rid of the evidence of what I believe was some kind of planned ambush or some kind of unexpected event that happened right there in the Wyoming woods. And for that reason and quite a few others, this needs to be explored, I think, in each of the courtrooms and similar, for a while. We don't have a complete picture yet of why Roberta would write something like burn after you read this on the top of something important. But if it was important enough, it likely contained hard evidence of crimes that Laundrie was probably, part of and similar. And if that's the case, that makes perfect sense of why they would want to burn it, to get rid of the evidence, or to get rid of the evidence the first time this came up. It's a good theory, and I think there's a lot more to learn. Thank you. Continue to spread the word and continue to get this, out there so we get this to the public's attention. They need to know about what happened in the Grand Teton Park. Appreciate it. This issue for right now. The problems surrounding the van are numerous because they describe the location where the alleged body of Gabby Petito was first discovered. According to a lot of, official reports really examined this. They show the moment when they found the body. Gabby's van is found unknowingly. They turn over the necessary evidence, and it doesn't get followed up on for some reason. So they start to nickname it the Gabby Petito Corpse Van. A blogger from the United States unknowingly recorded the place where the body of 22-year-old YouTuber Gabby Petito was found after an incident in the Wyoming wilderness. It is about the white van in which both she and her fiance, Brian Laundrie, traveled across the country. The woman could not believe what had just happened. It was a few days ago when the case of the disappearance of the YouTuber Gabby Petito shook the whole country, causing all the police and search bodies to begin to thoroughly investigate this controversial event, leaving a single person as a suspect, Gabby's fiance, Brian Laundrie. They find the body. After several days of searching, they managed to locate a body that met the physical characteristics of the missing young woman, identified as Gabby Petito, which was in the Grand Teton National Park that day. After the forensic reports were done, the authorities state that the human remains discovered on Sunday were those of Gabby Petito, and it is presumed by the manner of death that it was a homicide with Brian Laundrie as the main suspect after all. They show the moment when they found the body. Before all of these events occur, the travel blogger from the United States confesses that she had already seen the white van in which Gabby Petito and her fiance were traveling, and had even recorded it without knowing that it was the van they were traveling inside. According to the portal, the YouTuber Jen Bethune confessed that it was a Ford Transit Connecticut blank van, which she had seen and recorded with her GoPro on August 27th, right near Spread Creek. So again, it's not entirely confirmed, but the reports have stated numerous times that Gabby Petito's body was probably inside of the white van. There would be no other reason for the white van to look as conspicuous as it was, the way that it was, unless her body was actually stored inside the white van. So, and where I get that from is, folks, no one has ever actually seen on video, anywhere to my knowledge now, Gabby Petito walking around, in Wyoming, outside of the white van, around this time. So based upon other forensics, that they have done, and they've done online and similar things now as well, it's been assumed that Gabby Petito was not alive when they discovered, what occurred there with the van. I mean, she could have been, but there's no evidence to prove that she was still alive when they found the white van. So the main contention has always been, there's got to be key evidence still retained inside the van that deals with, Gabby Petito in specific, because of course, there's no reason to presume that she was alive. She might have already been a corpse. That's what they're pointing to, because they've done a lot of analysis too, and they've done analysis of the actual dirt around the area where the van was, and no one can confirm, that she was outside of it. And when you put two and two together, it does look like she may have already been deceased, or at least not conscious or something, because she was just inside the van, and nobody ever heard any sounds. They didn't confirm any kind of, whispers or speech or, anything like that. And so it's hard to determine really what status the body was even in. The YouTuber commented for the news that she had passed near the white van since the plates, which had the Florida license plate, caught her attention first. So, again, it's still a theory, but I'm going with more and more that I believe there's evidence in that van still that basically confirms how her corpse or how her body got into the inside of the van. And if that evidence is still inside the van, like some are speculating now, then that explains a huge amount of why they might write the phrase, burn after you read this, because that implies that perhaps, and I'm just saying until other analysis is done, because of course it can't be confirmed yet, but really perhaps Roberta wanted what was inside the van to be burned. That's all I'm going to say about that. Because it would make a lot of sense if there was a body at one time in there, if there was some remains of evidence that deals directly with how Gabby Petito got into the condition that she's in and similar, then they would desire to get rid of that as a consequence. And so, I don't know. It raises those questions, though. And I'd love to hear from you guys, most importantly. What do you think? Chime in here. And as always, like, subscribe, but continue to get the word out there. We need to get the word out there far and wide that this van has really never truly been investigated in a proper open form. And if that was partly what it was referring to there, that they wanted to burn the things inside the van, that could honestly explain a lot, folks. So continue to get the word out there. Let's examine this question of the Brian Laundrie letter under a much closer microscope again. Thank you.